The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of the Side Project Live are not necessarily those of the Illinois Libertarian Party, the National Libertarian Party, Radio Fubar, Tuiville, LRN.FM, the kindly old neighbor on the corner, some random jerk who just cut me off on I-80, the entire Broadway cast of Hair, Bruce Rauner or Pat Quinn, or the Martian Invaders. So there.
We'd like to invite you and all the members of your household
to gather around and join us now
for a very special episode of
Side Project Live. And what's so special about it?
I'm not wearing any pants.
You know who likes special entertainment like that? My mom!
Don't worry, we've got plenty of material. We'll all go on.
And welcome once again, friends and neighbors, to another action-packed, side-splitting, laugh-a-minute episode of the Side Project Live. Once again from beautiful, sunny Morris, Illinois. This is Jim Goebel.
And from SETI Alpha 6, this is Eric Ferguson.
Okay. Oh gosh, this has been a morning.
That's where Khan was marooned by James T. Kirk.
Aha! No wonder. It's been eons since I've seen that movie, and arguably the best of the Star Trek films.
It is pretty darn good. I like that one a lot. The new one, the 2009, not the newest one, but the one before the newest one. Yeah, that's pretty good too, where you meet Kirk and Spock and these guys. That's kind of slick.
Yeah, I heard that the first of the new ones was pretty good, and then they kind of found a way to tie it into the original series. And I heard middling to slightly negative reviews of the more recent one, which I guess, from what I understand, is a retelling of the whole Wrath of Khan thing.
Yeah, kind of setting the stage for that. So yeah, oh well.
Yeah, I just I don't know. I really don't see as many movies as I probably should. It's pretty gets to be pretty awkward. Hey, did you see this movie? No, I don't get to see very many movies because I just don't really have much cash to do it.
Yeah, that's me in more recent years. You see the new thing? No, sorry, didn't see it.
Yeah, no kidding. What's really sad is that everybody at work, nobody I know at work is watching The Walking Dead, but everybody's watching American Horror Story, and I think I've seen one episode of American Horror Story, and I'm like, really get really into The Walking Dead, despite some people, oh, that's a terrible show, and I'm like, yeah, you think that's a terrible show? You've obviously never seen anything on TLC. But but I won't go much further. Let me think. You can tweet us at the Side Project 2. Our email address is thesideproject2@gmail.com. Our hashtag, if you want us to search for something, it's hashtag TSP Live. And we still have our Google Voice number, 815-200-4912. Do have a show note. Due to some personal situations, starting not next week, but the week after that, I think it's the first Saturday of December, we're going to be going into reruns and a couple of pre-recorded shows. We're not going to be doing live. If you must know, I'm going in for surgery, and I'm not going to be I'm going to be confined to the first floor, and all of my recording stuff is on the second floor. So, and since it's foot surgery, I'm not going to be walking up and down stairs. That having been said, we'll read the DuPage ad here. Side Project Live is brought to you by the DuPage Libertarians. The DuPage Libertarians meet on the third Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. in Addison, Illinois, at the American Tap Pub and Grill, located at 701 West Lake Street in Addison, Illinois. $5 burgers, craft beer. What more can you ask for? You don't have to live like a refugee. So, okay, with that, I am hashtag you're it. And with that, I'm trying to get our guest Terry Knoll here. We're having some problems getting him connected, but I'm working on it.
Yes, we had trouble with that before.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work here, ladies and gentlemen.
You're getting a little bit of the behind the scenes. So I'm going to try inviting him again here.
Keep your scene behind where it belongs. Never mind. So, well, here in Will County, just 3 days ago, here's some election talk. We finally have a new sheriff. There's a new sheriff in town. Yeah, it took a long time to sort that out. 471 votes separated the two. So,
damn.
Yeah, close race. And I don't care.
Oh, that's it. Oh, I think that's okay. I think I've got this figured out. Okay.
One is just as I won't. Depends on which word you want to use, but the same. I'll just say that one's the same as the other. So depending on how you feel about law enforcement, it really doesn't.
Meet the new boss, same as the old.
That's right. Meet the new
Roger
boss.
Daltrey was right. Howard Johnson's right.
So there's a little tidbit of information. And it looks like doom is coming to Illinois. We're going to get, it's just a matter of when, we're going to get $10 an hour minimum wage so you can kiss your jobs goodbye.
But think about the small people, the little guys, you know.
Yeah, I know. Well, the only reason they're not paid that is because all those business owners are just evil, greedy buttheads, and that's why they don't want to pay them.
Well, you know why they're trying to raise the minimum wage.
Tax revenue.
Well, there's that, but mostly the reason unions are behind it is most union contracts are wage increases for union members are tied to a raise in the minimum wage. It's in their contract.
Often, if their contract is some rate above minimum wage, then yeah, they make more money too.
Yeah, that's generally what most of it is.
Yeah, there's that. But they look at increased tax revenue, and they look at hopefully that people will have more take-home money, and then they'll spend more money. No, because the price of the cheeseburger that they were going to buy just went up. So
yep. People just don't understand economics. It's not, minimum wage. How long before they put in a maximum wage around these parts? I mean, it's been talked about, and it's more.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on.
What is it? 40. We have the 4th highest minimum wage in the nation and 45th in job growth. Yeah, and we're gonna go. Yeah, that's brilliant. Just brilliant. But you voters, you asked for it.
You wanted it. You got it.
Yep, you asked for it.
Then
when you're
you see what
when your 30-year-olds are complaining that your teenager won't get a job because they can't.
And it's and the thing is that it doesn't hurt like Walmart or McDonald's, or mostly McDonald's and that, but it hurts mostly the small businesses. There's no a leeway made. There's no
and people make this argument like big companies. Look, okay, Walmart, the nation's largest employer, but where do most people have their job? In small companies with just a handful of employees. So that's where most people find their work, and they're all going to be paid. There he is.
Here.
Well, I have some bad news for you, Jim. I think the NSA has shut you down.
Get rid of me that easily. I have a feeling Google's going to shut me down first.
You were somewhere on the dark net, that part that doesn't get to anybody except who has the code.
Oh yeah, I was on the Tor browser, which is 100% completely safe, despite the fact the government shut down several hundred websites on the Tor browser network the last 2 weeks.
That's interesting.
Go figure that.
That plays into something kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit today too. So let's keep that in front of my head.
So everybody, welcome back to the show. He is one of the few repeat visitors we've had. Dr. Terry Knoll. How are you doing this morning, Terry?
Just terrific. How are you two?
Well, I can't complain because if I did, my wife would hit me with a frying pan.
Oh, well, you get off lucky. Mine usually grabs a big log out of the woods. Or she used to.
The only reason my wife would grab the frying pan is because she recently had surgery and she can't lift horribly, horribly heavy things. Otherwise, I think she'd be right there with you. You have to have several 2x4s together.
There you go. This is why I have cast iron frying pan.
Yeah.
Yeah, she hits me with the Teflon one, but that doesn't hurt that much because it just slides right off.
And those don't ring as loud either.
No, they don't. Yeah, not like the frying pans in the typical Three Stooges short.
Yep.
So, how are you doing today?
Well, just looking for some warmer and rainier weather here.
Oh, yeah, I hear that. After the show today, I got to go into the garage and replace all four brakes on our minivan. I've never done it before, but my brother's going to be coming down to help. And yeah, absolutely love the rain. And as I mentioned earlier, before you came on, I'm going to be going in for surgery on the 2nd, and so I have to do all of this in the garage while trying to, not get a cold. So that's always the fun thing.
Well, I think you're going to look great as a woman.
All that from an orthopedic surgeon. So, yeah, we wanted to have you back on because after the last time we had you on, Eric was me and Eric was talking, and Eric brought up the fact that we don't think we really covered everything that he felt we only did like half a show about Bitcoin, that there was other things that we could possibly talk about. And for everyone watching right now on Google Plus or on YouTube, man, my mouth is like below the little bar at the bottom. There we go. We do have the Q&A app open, so if you have any questions or anything for Terry, we'll be glad to take it. I totally, absolutely forgot to open my my Twitter. We don't have any questions there yet, but if I can find the damn thing. Oh, there it is. Tweet deck open. There we go. And if you want to email us, as I mentioned earlier, the email is thesideproject2@gmail.com. And yeah, that's the address. We get, I probably shouldn't do this, but we get so little email that I keep thinking that maybe I'm giving people the wrong email address, but nope, I'm giving them the right one.
I've been waiting for the Major League Baseball organization to call me for years. I figure they must have the wrong phone number or something.
Kind of reminds me of that one episode of The Simpsons where they give Bart all of that Ritalin, and then he gets all nervous and conspiracy oriented, and he claims that Major League Baseball was spying on people, and come to find out they really were.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so yeah, no message or anything. So, where did we leave off? First of all, I should probably look up the episode number, and I will grab that for people that want to go back. But I guess what were some of the oh, and Lex here. Hi, Lex.
There he is.
Hey, how's it going?
Sweet. All right, let me see here. Test. All right, I think I'm okay. All right. So, Eric, you were saying that you had some things that we didn't touch upon that you wanted to bring back up.
Well, we talked about what the current federal monetary system is. You know, it's ledger entries, and it's not backed by the amount of gold. It's you could argue that if you hold cash in your hand, you owe debt. So, we talked about that. We talked about how Bitcoin isn't that. But why do I want a Bitcoin? I mean, I have to use cash to buy some anyway. So and people are beginning to take it more and more. To what advantage is that, I think, is where we didn't really talk about.
Well, in my view, right now, there's not much of an advantage except in specific cases where people are doing things where they don't want to be traced. Now, people should realize that Bitcoin is not completely anonymous. All records of transactions are public. It's just that it takes a little while to track things down. It'd be very difficult to track a person or a company down.
Sure.
I think what we're seeing is a social experiment where we're asking ourselves, can a new type of currency that has most, if not all, of the characteristics that some economists think make for a sound currency, can this really be practical? And we're doing it in a wonderful way. We've got people out actually trying that to see if it works. So I would be hard-pressed to argue that the average citizen needs to go out and start using Bitcoin a lot. Maybe as an experiment, learn how it works, but there wouldn't be any great advantage now.
Okay, yeah, and that's what I was kind of thinking. It is definitely interesting, and if I wanted to keep a transaction secret, I could use cash. but
Yep.
I can't send cash over the internet, and it's not always a good idea to send that through the mail, so therefore, Bitcoin.
Yeah, I tried to buy something the other day. I just offered to send a picture of my cash.
You know, I heard the story a
And
while
then the
back.
police sent you back a picture of handcuffs?
Yeah, that's what it was. The guy got the story I'm thinking of is the guy got caught by a red light camera, and so they sent him a picture of his car going through the red light, and so
Right.
he sent them a picture of the cash, and then
Right.
they sent him back a picture of the handcuffs.
That's
I think that really happened. I don't know 100%. It sounds apocryphal, but I think it really did.
it has to be a true story. You can't make that up. That has to be.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, the person I tried this on sent me back a picture of a very rude gesture.
And surprisingly, it didn't have a middle finger.
You're number one. That's right. Okay.
That's right.
And then
why do all the other driveways think I'm number one?
Yeah. Well, then, as you just mentioned a minute ago, that some of the dark web got hit. So, what happens to Bitcoin? Can the government stop it altogether? Can they track certain transactions? How hard is it to do?
You know, it's funny you bring that up because last night I was researching the dark web a little bit. I was not aware that the government had shut down some of the tourist sites. I know that there had been at least a couple of problems with child pornography and a couple of other things. But this is what I think Bitcoin really represents. This is the currency subset of a lot of things that I think fall under what's called peer-to-peer computing. And the internet evolved in such a way that to make it more useful and more widespread, it came to be a fairly centralized set of networks. And this peer-to-peer computing is very interesting because in theory, you can set up a series of just individual computers to house information. And so they've got small, you wouldn't exactly call them internets, but they're small networks in some places in the world where groups of people have gotten together, and there's not really, as far as I can tell, anything we'd call a central server or a central network. It's that these computers share information in random ways so that it is extremely difficult to identify who in particular is searching for certain things, has certain files, and so forth. So I think as this peer-to-peer computing gains credibility, we work out some of the bugs, and Bitcoin is kind of an example of that peer-to-peer networking. We're going to see it very, very difficult for any authority to police it, to stop it, or to shut it down. That's pretty significant for libertarians.
Yeah, I agree. But what happens with some decentralization? I mean, one of the reasons for having a unified currency across a country is because of that functionality. So does Bitcoin perhaps suffer from decentralization?
Well, we have to remember that there's no reason. There's two kinds of centralization in a currency. First, we can have the model that we're accustomed to and we use now, fiat currency, in which a governmental body establishes that a certain thing, in our case the US dollar, must be accepted, although that's not universally true. For the most part, you have to accept the dollar in payment. If someone offers to pay off a debt with a dollar, you're supposed to be able to force the person who has the debt against you to accept it. Now, there's another way a currency can become centralized, and gold is a good example here. Gold does not have to be designated as the legal currency for a culture or a society. It just happens that gold has some pretty neat characteristics, and people came with no really directing body saying to do this. They just came to accept gold as a standard of currency. In that case, you have one currency basically that is accepted just because it kind of emerged from people's interactions. Centralization in that way is consistent with libertarian principles in that nobody's dictated it. It's just everybody finds that gold's a good currency.
Yeah,
I wanted to, with that, a couple of things I wanted to bring up here. First of all, something I've known about for a while, and is kind of wanting to ask you about this on the last episode, but I didn't bring it up for whatever reason, and I don't know how much you know about this. But what about the alternative local currencies? Say in Ithaca, New York, they have the system called the Ithaca hours.
Yeah.
What about that sort of a currency?
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? There is no reason that you couldn't have a million different currencies operating in the U.S. One thing that Ron Paul advocated was to allow anything anybody chose to serve as money. Now, one's first reaction is, oh, well, that would be utter chaos. But in fact, people will not very long accept a currency that is not sound. So the purpose of money, among other things, is to store value. So I'm not likely to agree to use a currency that I don't feel like is going to be valuable in a month or a year or 5 years or whatever time horizon I'm looking at. So the competition of various kinds of currencies will result in a currency that is accepted widely will invariably be one that is sound, one that people can count on to retain its value over a period of years, be accepted in general by other people, and so forth. These local currencies are kind of an anomaly, though. You kind of have this little system where you've got this mini economy operating. I am shocked, frankly, that they're proving popular. From what I understand in Ithaca, this has been very popular with merchants and the people who live around Ithaca.
What's
I was
interesting
just
is
reading here on Wikipedia that in the year 2000 they introduced the new bill, a 1/10th hour. One Ithaca hour is roughly equivalent to $10. If our listeners haven't guessed, I mean, it's one Ithaca hour is the equivalent of value of a person, 1 hour of an individual's labor. And they have various currencies like that. And I'm just looking here on Wikipedia, and I did not realize all of the different local currencies in the United States. A couple that I have on here. There's Alaska, Arizona, quite a few of them in California, Colorado, Connecticut, D.C. has the Potomacs, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Indiana, of course not Illinois, Iowa, Kansas. I mean, it looks like about half of the states, at least one or two communities, the very least, have some form of local currencies. The most successful is the Ithaca hours in New York.
Do you have any details about what we have in Indiana?
Yeah, let me look here. Where was it? Oh, Bloomington hours.
Okay, yeah, that's about 75 miles southwest of here, so...
yeah, and and of course their website for the Bloomington hours is down. So take that however you want. But
that's an interesting thought, though. I mean, that was something that people complained about, going back, a couple of generations, like coal miners being paid in script instead of money, and they could only use it at the coal mine store.
Yep.
Technically, a Walmart gift card is that sort of a thing. It's not really. If Walmart really wanted to, they could unhook the value of a Walmart gift card from the dollar and have their own genuine 100% currency. And quite honestly, if anyone was going to do it, I think Walmart would.
Well, and this is the point at which government gets very nervous, because the advantage to government of being able to control the acceptance of the currency through legal tender laws is that gives them leverage to do things with the currency that are to government's advantage. For example, inflating the dollar so that it, even at 2%, if you do the math, it doesn't take but a generation for you to have about half the value. So if I hold a dollar bill, it's worth half as much, can buy half as many things as it does now in a matter of 25 or 30 years. Once currencies start emerging that have the characteristics that people want, which are they retain value, they store value well, and they're widely accepted, then that gives the dollar, it takes away the dollar's advantage. So any currency which really starts to threaten to be used in place of the U.S. dollar, we're going to see government probably raise Cain about that.
I find it interesting that I've not heard of the government going after anything like the Ithaca hours or whatever it is they have in Madison, Wisconsin, or Bloomington, Indiana, going after those. But they made a huge deal about the Liberty Dollar years ago, and I'm thinking that was only because it was backed by gold and silver. Would you have a comment on that?
The Liberty Dollar, they as I recall, prosecuted as a counterfeit case. Now, here was the irony. Why do you counterfeit something? I mean, why would I go out and print a bunch of 50s or 20s or whatever they counterfeit in? It's because I can make that cheaper and spend it and get that $20 worth of value out of that more than I can, actually earning that $20. So I'm getting an advantage because I'm giving something that's essentially worthless and pretending it's a $20 bill. The Liberty Dollar was made out of silver, for heaven's sake. It was worth more than its denominational value. But the government, man, they lowered the boom on the Liberty Dollar. And
they confiscated all their gold and silver and stuff.
Well,
took all their stuff.
And the case they made... The case they made was that the insignia was too close to a real, I don't know whether they were comparing it to a silver eagle or what, but that it was made to look like, quote, real money. And
despite the fact that their bills were all wildly colorful, and even with the color they've added to our bills now, it's still like green and white for the most part. The way I understand it, the way I understood it, and was that it was mostly that they were pissed that they were using the word dollar.
Well, that could.
They were treating it like a copyright thing rather than something else. They really wanted to close the Liberty Dollar down, the way I understand it, and they were just looking for any sort of a reason they could find.
Well, yeah, and I think that the argument they may have made, not that I endorse this argument, but it was probably that people could legitimately confuse that as a U.S. issued unit of money. So any currency that does that openly is going to run into tremendous problems.
Something to my computer because all that stuff is back.
So this gets us, though, to a really deeper issue that I wonder if you guys are interested in. This sharing economy, have you done much reading on how that works?
I have not.
This is, you have to go back to the real rock bottom fundamentals of what an economy is. If each of us were to have to go out and get all of the things we need to survive and prosper through only our own efforts, we would probably live to the ripe old age of 33, and it would be a pretty miserable 33 years.
And we'd probably be crucified at the end of the 33.
Good one there. Somebody had his coffee. The problem is that we all know under those circumstances that we would probably, not many of us would even survive, much less live prosperous lives.
We would need help.
Yes.
And help comes from other human beings. And the whole of any economy rests on two basic things. One is specialization. You make blankets better than I make bows and arrows, and if we trade, we are both better off. And this is a principle that at least 535 people don't understand in this country. All right, we'll 534. Rand Paul might get it. But there's special.
Justin Amash probably.
And the ability to trade are what make us human beings in many ways. And so as we learn to trade, interactions among people get more and more complex, and it becomes handy to have something that we can use to trade things other than the things themselves. So instead of bartering,
money.
we wind up having money. Now, money can be anything. that people accept socially and widely as having certain characteristics. But communicating in a small tribe, let's say, would be fairly easy. I know that you make bows and arrows better, and I know I make blankets better, and we can trade. And if we don't have the coincidence of wants, as it's called, that if we don't need each other's goods at the same time, I can give you something that represents that trade as a marker, which later you can trade back or trade to somebody else. Now, the internet is only 20 years old, but the internet has done something to human society that I cannot recall anything, even the Industrial Revolution, that changed what it is to be a human being as radically. Now, with the internet, we can instantaneously, without geographical limit, communicate our mutual needs and wants to each other and our willingness to trade. So the share economy is emerging as a kind of solving this coincidence of wants problem. So if you need to use a car and I need to use a power washer and we happen to live within 5 miles of each other, we can find this out on the internet. We can trade these kinds of things in a way we could not do before we had the ability to pass information so quickly and easily. Now, a good question to ask is, what does this do to money? I mean, does this reduce the need for money? Does it eliminate it?
Yeah, finding people to trade with. You know, I can, even if you don't need what I have, if I'm willing to give you money, then okay, fine, I'll do this. But yeah, finding people to trade with when you wouldn't need money, that's interesting what the internet can bring to that.
Yeah. And from a libertarian point of view, this is very interesting because although technically speaking barter is covered by the IRS regulations, you can't just go trading stuff willy-nilly without expecting to pay taxes on it. Don't ask me how that works, but imagine a society in which people have enough information, and let's further imagine that it's done through peer-to-peer networking where it's nearly impossible to trace. Now we have this very interesting phenomenon where people all over the planet can trade for things that they want just without any authority whatsoever. This has to make governments extremely nervous. And I think it's one reason we're starting to see governments clamp down in countries that are run by true thugs and not just wannabe thugs. In trying to control the content of the internet, trying to control the networking. This is why it's so important that we don't lose control of ICANN, the root file registry for the internet, because if we let the UN get a hold of that, it's Katie bar the door. But it makes the technology is emerging where theoretically a society can exist all over the planet without states. Now, I'm not advocating that. I'm a libertarian, not an anarchist, but I think at least theoretically it's pretty interesting.
Now, I do want to just take a moment here to remind our viewers and listeners that if you're watching right now, at the bottom of my screen here, I have the URL for the previous episode that Terry was on. It's sideproject.radiofoobar.com/?q=287. Or you can just go to tsplive.com and go to page 2, and I think it's right. It's like halfway down page 2. Also, we have the Q&A app open, so if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to go ahead and ask away. Terry has graciously allowed us to have people ask him questions, for lack of a better term, and so there you go. And continuing.
So this whole peer-to-peer networking and this anonymity on the internet is something that I think we're in the very, very early stages of understanding. But as computing power and our ability to hide from any authority is opening some doors that libertarians just simply didn't have access to before information could be sent about the planet so easily.
The thing with the internet, the big Achilles heel is that there's like 6 or 7 central servers around the world. They're like in hidden locations. I do know one of them is in Virginia somewhere. It's like they're like in a mountain, and and pretty much all of these things are bottlenecks, and everything's got to go through there, and through a through like a search warrant type thing, the Department of Justice or whatever can request anything they want from anyone, and that's the big problem with the internet and really with things like Bitcoin. There is a movement to start a true peer-to-peer mesh internet where there's no central server, and you can be more anonymous. And if one node goes down, gets shut down by the government, well, all the other nodes are there to pick up the slack.
Well, it happens. It
Not
happens.
just their main nodes.
Yeah, it's happening in some countries where they have strict government censorship over the internet, and doing so is usually very illegal. But there are people, especially in tight metropolitan areas, that have their own little 3-block wide little intranet on their own, just all Wi-Fi across from buildings and whatnot. And there's actually that's growing.
Well, and one of those 6 servers is right here under my desk. And Jim, I know what you did Thursday night. Okay, so.
I got to clean my search history. Hold on.
Well, Eric, that's a great point, because we say, oh well, everything is centralized through the internet, and that is true. That's the way it evolved, and for a very good reason. I mean, the internet is wonderful. I mean, even with all of the threats we have emerging now that it's kind of gotten away from government, it's a wonderful thing. Now, here's the big question: can these types of peer-to-peer networks be constructed in such a way that it's hard for government to kill them? And the way I think of it is like the human body. I mean, if I go get a cut on my arm, my whole body doesn't shut down. What happens is my body says, oh, we have an injury here, and it does all the wonderful things that nature provides for it to do, excuse me, to heal that up. And so in order to take out my whole existence, you have to do a lot more than just cut me on the arm. Now, it's the same way with peer-to-peer networks. You might get a piece of it, but immediately the rest of the network just fills that in. So it would take an enormous effort to shut down anything like a majority of peer-to-peer networks. Excuse me.
That's interesting. So, and like, well, to get back on the Bitcoin, like you were talking about earlier, you brought up counterfeit currency. I like to use the word unbacked currency. And if you think about that, isn't the U.S. dollar then counterfeit?
Well, some people would argue that it is. Some people argue that all fiat money is counterfeit. But what you have to remember, though, is that fiat money works. Now, we may not like it. There may be some features of fiat money that we think violate our libertarian principles. But in fact, fiat money works. And it works because money is sound, or it's usable at least, when people believe that it is sound and it does the things they count on it to do. So the people who issue these edicts that say you must use this particular currency are bound by reality. If the U.S. government were to start printing, let's say, not just trillions of dollars, but really big amounts of money, like quadrillions of dollars.
Like the Weimar Republic.
Like the Weimar Republic, exactly.
Yeah.
Where they were printing quadrillions of dollars, from what I understand is quadrillions a day in bills, then the law wouldn't matter. The law would have no practical impact. So, just as kings had to recognize the bounds of their power, they couldn't do just anything without the risk of being beheaded or overthrown or whatever. Issuers or the people who established laws for fiat money are bound by the mechanics of money itself. They can't devalue it or it becomes completely worthless, and they know that people would just quit using it no matter what the law says.
Yeah, the old East German mark. People would rather burn money for heat than buy fuel.
Exactly. But unbacked is an argument for those who propose the gold standard or a return to the gold standard, because they recognize that gold has served well as basis for all currencies. Gold, though, has one characteristic that governments hate, and that is the supply of gold is limited, and it grows very slowly. So any currency that is backed or tied to gold cannot be inflated by increasing the money supply. This takes away a very important tool for progressives and government, in which they want the government to have the power to spend more money on doing more things to make all of us live happier, more prosperous, and whatever lives.
But one question I've had, I mean, we always bring up the point that, and I don't remember if I brought this up in our last talk, but then again, I don't remember waking up this morning either. But
this is a dream.
it could very well be. But isn't it's definitely true that the only reason a dollar has value is because we believe it has value. Wouldn't that also apply to, say, stuff like gold and silver?
Sure. And that's the very heart of the argument. It's not that gold there's nothing special about gold. It could be weeds. It could be anything. Shells, bark.
Or as in the case of the Douglas Adams novel, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, they adopted the leaf as the monetary standard, and because of the hyperinflation, they went around the planet burning down all the trees.
Yeah. And the thing is, the characteristic of gold that makes it what it is about 5,000 years of history in which it has just served very well as a standard of exchange. And it serves so well because it's just got these characteristics that...
Well, it's pretty.
Well, it's pretty, but, pearls are pretty. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty, but I'm not a currency.
Hey, now. You're also humble.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of my better qualities.
Yeah. Eye hath not seen, nor ear hath heard of his humility.
Yeah, I think humility's overrated myself, but no, anything can serve, and now we're entering an era which something else is emerging that has many of these desirable characteristics. It's just represented as basically zeros and ones. All of this is information. I mean, the gold itself, gold has a few uses, like the wiring in spacecraft. Need to be very efficient.
I recall Kodak came out with a series of batteries back in the late 80s, early 90s that their big thing was touting gold tips for a better contact, and if they still make those batteries, but they don't have the gold tips anymore.
Yeah, well, the thing is with gold, since it has so few industrial uses, it has very little practical value. But if you really think about it, it is information. When I hold an ounce of gold in my possession, it indicates to other people that I have done something of value for others. And
True.
Assuming I didn't knock somebody on the head and take it.
It like the government.
What's that, Eric?
Like the government.
Yeah, like the government. It shows other people that I have contributed to someone else or some set of people some value for which they thought an ounce of gold was worth it. So that's information. Now, if it's zeros and ones, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to exist in physical form, because people can look at my offering in trade bitcoins, and they can say the same thing. If everybody were using bitcoins the world over, they would be able to get information about me in exactly the same way. So we have to remember that money is not that hard physical thing that we carry around. It's the information it conveys to other people that want to trade with us.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, my bank balance is just a number.
Yep.
You know, you brought up something there. Looks like we're getting a little feedback again. Okay. You brought up something there. Bitcoin basically being ones and zeros. Now, unlike the one of the positive things about gold is it's a physical thing that you can hold in your hand. The worst you can do is have it melted down, but you can always re-extract it and whatever. If your computer goes down, if a server goes down, those bitcoins, couldn't they just disappear?
Yes, that's literally what happens. It is only information, and this is one possible shortcoming of bitcoins. I mean, if we get hit by a rogue asteroid and we have some reasonable protection.
Well, we have reasonable protection. Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis, yeah. But we've got our gold there, let's say, and it might get melted down a little bit. It might get dirty, and we might have to refine it, but we've still got that gold.
Right.
If we get an electromagnetic pulse device detonated in our atmosphere that knocks out all the computers, things start to get dicey. Now, the thing about these peer-to-peer networks and the way Bitcoin is set up, that block ledger that's kept up has some very robust characteristics. So there is not much danger of, unless every computer on the planet were wiped out, there's not much danger of looking at information.
Thing for that to happen.
What's that?
That would have to be some huge cataclysm for that to happen.
Well, yeah, and you know, if
in other words, extremely rare.
Yeah, there's something like that happens. The last thing we're going to be worried about is where our money is. We're going to be trying to figure out what we'd like to do before we die, because it's going to be coming up pretty soon.
Now, we got about 10 more minutes left of the show. One thing I know we didn't talk about on our previous episode. What about the future of Bitcoin? I mean, what do you see happening with it from here on out?
Oh, they'll make sure that it doesn't get too wild and woolly. Already we're seeing some governments recognize that exchanges for Bitcoin can exist. In other words, you can legally have an exchange where people can come trade their money for Bitcoins, but they'll be regulated and supervised. I think that Bitcoin, like many first movers in any market, they'll no doubt have some problems, maybe even some catastrophes. And probably 20 years from now, we'll finally remember that Bitcoin thing and how that went? And something else will have emerged in its place. But now the cat's out of the bag. I mean, now we recognize that, wait a minute, people can exchange this fundamental economic activity that we engage in as human beings, trade with one another for our mutual benefit. And we always have to remember that's the purpose of any economy. All of those things will start to change because we realize we've had far too narrow a view of the mechanics through which that can take place. Governments will not like this at all. Governments will fight tooth and nail to make sure this doesn't get too far away from them. But I think at some point, unless we just see a radical taking over of all the governments of the of the planet in some very, very tightly controlled way, this computing is going to get away from states completely. We're going to see, I think, an era in which more and more the state is simply not necessary, and there's simply no reason to have the state around doing all the things that it tends to do now.
You know, I don't know if you've heard of this, but on March 14th, 2015, at 9:26 a.m., the nation of Dominica, not to be confused with the Dominican Republic, which is a totally different country, they're going to send some Bitcoin to every every citizen of the nation. It's about 70,000 people that are going to be getting some part of Bitcoin, and this, I believe, is government sponsored. The website that talks about this, it's called letthebitdrop.com. So people might want to check that out. A country, an actual country, granted, a small country, recognizing Bitcoin and using it not as their official currency, but they're using it in addition to their currency.
How did they lay their hands on the Bitcoins? They had to tax people and then just converted it to Bitcoin, right?
That I don't know. I don't know how they're doing that, but it looks like there's more information on letthebitdrop.com. I actually had heard this story a couple of months ago on the Bogosity podcast where this was going to happen. And I just thought that was interesting that a country is wow, I'm getting feedback again. That a country is going to be adopting Bitcoin, and like I said, granted it's a small country, but that's I think that's an interesting development.
Yeah, I mean, I love to see this. I mean, the more experiments we have with Bitcoin and the more things that we start to have some adventures with in getting people the ability to trade more easily, to trade with more, to have more choices about trade, I think the better off we all are. I think one thing that is happening that may be more important than Bitcoin in terms of this whole idea of escaping government regulations, and then I think that's Uber and Lyft. This is as listeners may recall, this is the service for rides that they have really embarrassed some governments.
Oh yeah.
Because they have decided not to just lie down and say, "Oh, we're only going to go in those places where they say it's okay."
It's the corrupt taxi medallion monopoly in pretty much every major metropolitan city.
Exactly.
And fighting against this, and in fact, I think wasn't it Portland, Oregon? I think it was some West Coast city actually outlawed Uber and Lyft because they said, "Oh, they're not regulated" and that sort of thing.
But what happened with Uber is they decided that they would just go on a campaign. So they just, I mean, it's blitzkrieg. They just come in and they start offering it, and they virtually dare government to stop them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interesting thing here is that you've got people freely contracting with one another for what they each have.
Mm-hmm.
And thumbing their nose at government and saying, "You can't tell me who I should take a ride from and who I shouldn't. You can't restrict how I do this." And the fact that it's becoming wildly successful in some places is very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a measure. I think there's a measure of hypocrisy there because they keep telling people that we should be carpooling or whatever. They build these high occupancy vehicle lanes in the major metropolitan areas, but then they're shutting stuff down like Uber and Lyft because they're basically the logical progression of carpooling.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll be sure to offend many people with this one, but anytime I hear an environmentalist praising what the programs that they have, I always, one, grab my wallet, and then two, start thinking about what is it exactly that you're advocating. The so-called green movement, while none of us want to have a planet that's so foul that we can't live well on it, the green movement has embarrassed itself so many ways. I'm shocked that anybody still pays attention to them.
Yeah. My whole philosophy on that is that whether global warming is real or not, we should be living as if it were, but by choice, not by force.
Yeah, and not only that, but I think that one of the biggest fallacies of it is even if all these doomsday predictions were true, why would anybody trust the government when you look at the government's record on pollution and environmental disasters, which far exceeds anything that capitalism has done?
Well, you're absolutely right, and what what I think, and I don't think this is a cynical point of view, I think it's just very realistic, is that I think the root motive is power. I think that
Of course.
there is a progressive mindset which just, and you can't drive this out of people once they get it. It's like a bloody virus. They're absolutely positively convinced that people cannot prosper without some central authority figure telling them how to live to make them better. It's presumptuous, it's arrogant, and invariably a bad idea.
Yeah, that sound effect we just heard a moment ago means that we're just about out of time. We only got about 4 minutes left here.
One thing I want to say really quickly,
Yeah.
you know, I've been a libertarian for 20 years now, and the whole thing about what is money and fiat currency and gold and all that, I mean, I was up on just about every issue except for that one, and then it was really during Ron Paul's 2012 presidential campaign that I really started to learn about all that. And one thing that was inspiring to me, since I listened to just about every, I found there's a podcast that had just about every one of his campaign speeches on there, many of which were on college campuses, and what was inspiring to me is when Ron Paul would just say the name Ben Bernanke, not say Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, just say the name Ben Bernanke, and all of a sudden you hear a chorus of boos among 5,000 college students. So it's really glad we're all indebted to Ron Paul for, you know, increasing public awareness on this issue.
Yeah, yeah. And let's not forget the most important recent development. People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive was once again not me.
Yeah, well, me neither, sadly. It'd have to be a special double episode, you know, double issue. Terry, before we take off here, if anybody has any questions about Bitcoin or anything, would they be able to contact you?
The best thing to do would be to send the question into the show, and you can just relay that to me, and I will be glad to get back.
Hey, it works for me. We can do that. And to remind everybody, our email address is that's our website. Our email address is thesideproject2@gmail.com. If you want to hear the previous podcast we did with Terry, it's sideproject.radiofubar.com/?. I can't. This is backwards. I can't tell if that's a Q or a P.
That's a P.
Equals, I think it's a P. I think it's a P. Yeah, page equals 287. That'll take you to episode, I think it was 135, 136. Or you can just go TSP Live, go to the second page. It'll be there. And we'll relay any question you have for Terry, and we get enough of them, we'll schedule another episode with him and answer your questions and go from there. Once again, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. As with all of our guests, you have an open invite whenever you want to come on. I'm just glad that you remembered that you remembered to put clothes on this time. And,
Well,
we don't want to scare. I mean, you know, me, Eric, and Lex scare enough people away fully clothed the way it is. So thank you for coming by.
appreciate it.
And once again, from Morris, Illinois, this is Jim Goebel.
From Indianapolis, Lex Zorn.
From Lockport, Illinois, Eric Ferguson.
And we will see you all next week. Don't forget, after next week's show, we're going to be going pre-recorded probably until the new year due to some personal issues with myself, mainly foot surgery. So go from there. So we will see you all later. Take care.
Peace.
This conclude. That is all.